Show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item up will be our roll call. Darrell Owens.
Here.
Felicia Moody.
Here.
Maria Douglas, she is absent and she let me know that she's under the weather with a bug. Debbie Villa Gomez.
Here.
Sean Glovier.
Here.
Andrew Bisco.
Here.
John Clark, present. We have a quorum to participate. Next up, we have public comments on agenda items. We have one individual who signed up for comments on the agenda item, Daniel J. Bennett. Please state your name and address on the record, please.
Daniel J. Bennett, 408 Pemberton, White Settlement, Texas. President Clark, Superintendent G, trustees. I'm speaking on the appraisal district election. 2 years ago, you voted for Mr. Lasada. He did present to you here. He's over in Crowley at the moment, speaking to the Crowley trustee, so he's trying to get here. As a candidate for the appraisal district in 2017, I pledged to the taxing units that I will work for more transparent and accountable appraisal district, win or lose. I did get your votes in 2017. I really appreciate that. I've kept this promise. I asked Mr. Lasada to run in 2019, do his testimony before the Senate Subcommittee on Property Tax Reform, and in 6 years on the Tarrant Appraisal District ARB as a panel chair from 2009 to 2015, 2009 to 2015, and his vast experience in human resource. I guess he wanted me to let you know that he couldn't be here tonight, however, because he did have that conflict, but I'm not going to. I've already expressed that. He'd like to remind you, though, on your ballot. On your ballot, it says you have to have it in by December 15th. Well, Mr. Laws being a stickler, there was a resolution that was disqualified because it was in October 15th. So you need to have your ballot in by 11:59, December 14th, p.m. So don't turn it on the 15th, it'll be kicked out. We want your votes to count. Furthermore, he wanted me to restate the great progress that's been made at the TAD over the past 2 years. In particular, the increase in transparency. Board meetings, agendas are now provided online in advance, which they never were. They never put an agenda online at all prior to 2020. Additional meetings are broadcast live, never before, until 2020. With backup packets and detailed agenda items so the public can follow along. In addition, all these meetings that are broadcasted live increases the communications to the taxing entity. That's one of the things he wanted to do. He wanted to be able to improve the communications between the taxing units and the district. I think he's successfully done that. It's not perfect, but they've improved a great amount. Unused monies up to almost $2 million was returned to the taxing entities. That's the first time that had happened over the past 2 years. And one of the big things I really think is great, contract and billing arrangements in excess of $50,000 now goes to the board. In the past, $100,000, $200,000 contract, Mr. Law would just sign without any board oversight. That's ended. And Mr. Lasada has ended it. Now it goes to the board for approval. Mr. Lasada, too, has pledged to Kennedy LISD for more transparent and accountable district, and I know he has kept this pledge to you. He feels he has done an excellent job, and I feel he has too, representing the taxing entities and attend board meetings totally prepared and ready to do business. I'll give you an example. Mr. Papa, who is Arlington's ISD, he's on your list. He's missed 30% of the meetings. You really have to watch these meetings and know who you're voting for. He missed the November 12th meeting and didn't even call in. I mean, to me, it's unacceptable. Mrs. Assad is always prepared. While a lot has been accomplished, he feels there is more to do, and that is why he's running again. And he asks you respectfully for your votes. And I hope he makes it here before you guys do cast your ballot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No one else has signed up on the agenda for agenda items. We have no one who signed up to speak on non-agenda items. So we'll move to our special district recognitions.
Okay, got a few things. The first will be our Paul Awards. So our Positively Awesome Wildcat Employee Recognition Program for this month at Kennedale High School. Aaron Todd Lee, Allison Booble, Allison Middleton, Christy Vick, Dee Dee Grimes, Kaylee Bond, Kylie Robinson, Marissa Church, Marquita Nelson, Mary Harrod, Matt Casey, Matthew Munson, Melissa Springfield, Michael Cagle, Michelle Petrie, Officer Quincy Milliken, and Tina Thomas. At the junior high school, Coach Drechtel, I said that right, Derek Jones, Reggie Rhines, Robin Fleeman, and Taylor Vaughn. At Arthur Intermediate, Carrie Neal, Evelyn Ish, Lauren Long, Sandy Manning. At Patterson Elementary, Angela Hamilton, Connie Dorosky, Courtney Spitzer, Lisa Poe Horton, Priscilla Hightower, and Sandra Ball. And at Delaney Elementary, Michelle Keller. In the central office, Brandy King, Chad G, Jill Smith, Laura Adams received 2, Monica Rawls, and Robin Shaw received 2. And those are our Paul Awards for this month. I have someone that I would like to introduce to everyone. Mr. Spruill, if you would come down, please. So this is Johnny Spruill. Mr. Spruill is going to show him what he is. He's already on the job, sorry. Our new Director of Safety and Security, so I'd like everyone to welcome him to our district. Give you some background. Mr. Spruill has retired from the military, Army as a colonel, and from Arlington Police Department, and we just got him away from Mansfield ISD, so very pleased to have him here in our district. So, once again, welcome aboard. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Now, I could have all of you join me out here, and if you'll hand me that thing right there. Every year we do, not every year, but the past few years we have done a employee recognition program, and on behalf of the board and myself, we would like to say that tonight this is going to go out. We're about to take a picture holding the sign, so y'all jump on in here, and we're going to send this out to all of our employees, and they will be receiving a $500 check. Once again, thank you all for everything you do for our district, and we don't spend it all black.
Black Friday's gone.
All right. So I think that is all of our recognitions, and once again, it's been I'd say a tough start to school, and our principals have just, we've been doing our instructional rounds, and our principals are just now feeling, I'm starting to hear from my teachers and my superintendent rounds that things are starting to get back to normal. So we're just now kind of getting to that point in the school year where things are starting to feel the way they should feel. So kudos to everyone that's been rolling up your sleeves and getting to work every day. So thank y'all. All right. So
Okay. Next is consent agenda. All items listed under the subheading will be adopted with one motion unless they are removed from the consent agenda by a trustee for discussion. Does any trustee request the removal of any item from the consent agenda? I have not heard any requests, so I'll entertain a motion with regard to the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve all items under the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Mr. Glovier.
Second.
Second by Ms. Villa Gomez. She beat you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair hears none. That motion passes unanimously. Move on to item 7. These are informational issues only. Item 7A is a presentation from Huckabee and Associates regarding scope, schedule, and budget briefing.
all right. Right now.
Good evening. My name is Josh Cogburn with Huckabee Architects.
And tonight I'm going to share with you an update on the scope, schedule, and budget for the Early Childhood Center project.
Let's pour Coke on it.
Got it. Okay, so I'll start with scope. The floor plan on the right shows you clearly the areas that we would be touching as part of the project. One of the main first items is the demo and refresh of the areas highlighted in green for pre-K and kindergarten. Some of that involves taking out a demising wall between two classrooms to make one larger classroom. We would also demo and reconfigure the motor lab area for specials, modify some existing walls for windows and access to outdoor areas. There is a set of restrooms within that area that's highlighted in yellow that we would update for ADA compliance and update the finishes within that area as well. Millwork in the renovated areas that we'd be touching. A secure vestibule, so we're planning for right now for that to be part of the two-story building, the main entrance into that area, creating a secure vestibule into the school. Updating the signage to reflect the Early Childhood Center. The large rectangle in the plan north would be the music gymnasium that we would remodel for an interactive space. We'd create two playscapes, two playground areas. I've got that highlighted on the back side of the two-story building with a covering for outdoor learning there. We'd look at improving the traffic flow with a new drive to the north side of the gymnasium, competition gym, and music gym. Update the finishes in the surrounding corridors, and so that's highlighted in yellow around the areas that we'd be touching for kinder and pre-K in the single-story building. So we analyzed all of that scope, and the budget for construction we came to was $2,077,600. When you add general conditions, fees, permits, there's a FF&E budget for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and contingency. That total comes to $2,804,760. So we took that scope and analyzed how that reflects into our schedule. And so the schedule currently for that scope is we'd be wrapping up schematic design at the end of January 2022. Our design development and construction document phase would be wrapping up in March 31st of 22. Bidding negotiations and award would occur during that time frame from March to April. We plan to come to the April board meeting to be able to award that contract to a contractor. Construction would start May 30th. Construction complete, I have August 1st. We know that is a very aggressive time frame. The focus for the first part of that work would be anything that's happening in the two-story building so that we could get that turned over for pre-K and kindergarten for the start of the 2022-23 school year. If by chance the contractor can get all the scope of work done, great, but there is a chance that it's just a little too compressed. We may need a little additional time, so that would be wrapped up at the end of the school year, end of 22, and do a mid-year switch for the 2022-23 school year.
There are a few things that we are, since it's not a new build and it's just a renovation, we're not having to deal with the steel and steel costs and bringing those in and the waste there, and we're trying to, we're going to try to ensure that most of the stuff is bought here in America so that we can get there.
That's correct. It is good that, like Mr. G said, steel we're not having to worry with. There's a lot of things happening in the market right now with materials. Steel is one of those. We don't have to deal with that. But on the flip side, for finishes, we've been working through this for the last year and a half. And so our interiors department has been able to narrow down finishes that are readily available that we can get locally within the area, within the United States. So we're not having to worry about shipping, getting it here. So any of those, we would select those materials that we could ensure they would get here in time to be able to turn those spaces over on schedule.
And this is the scope of what we laid out in the community meetings and what Robert had come up with. This is the general idea, and this is within the scope there.
And public comment or involvement begins when? It's already begun, I know, but additional comments as far as schematic design or design development?
So we're just starting on the project, and so we're wrapping our hands around it. We will be visiting the site here in a few weeks. and then setting up the necessary meetings that we need for the schematic design development and into design development. So those will be happening possibly starting in December and continuing into January. And at each one of these phases, I will come back to you with the presentations showing the progress. And I think the goal is that any community members that were involved in helping plan would be invited to that meeting so that we could share them with them the updates that we made.
So the public at large knows you will engage teachers in these buildings and facilities, administrators who are gonna handle that, so they are involved in how we deliver these materials to students at that age level, given your design.
We've had conversations with Courtney, who'll be the principal. We'll be setting up quite a few meetings with her to get her involvement and input, and any staff that would be necessary to help decide how this space develops.
Okay, I have a question to
Yes,
follow
ma'am.
up with what he said. So in the first presentation, it was the community would be involved. So you're gonna start with the staff and then bring what the staff says to the community, and we would have the public meetings then? Is that the time frame or the flow?
The reality is how many community meetings are you planning on having?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking him. Or I'm asking y'all, us, I guess, everybody. Because when it was presented, it was, we'll all have opportunity, the community will have opportunity to give input. So I just wanna make sure that we, one, stick to that, and then two, if we're gonna do this in December, January, then we're looking at the calendar as to when that's going to occur. So,
And this is kind of what we're looking at with the scope and the schedule, and this is what we need to find out from you is how, aggressive they need to be. So this is why we're having this discussion right now, because they can't really do anything until y'all give them guidance of where y'all wanna go with the project and how fast you wanna go with the project. So that's
Okay,
kind of
so
what we're
then-
scoping out right now.
so you're getting suggestions to bring to the community.
So we would
What
meet.
is the flow, what is the flow?
Sure. So we've had a couple of meetings with Mr. G and Courtney and Eileen, just to understand the initial scope outline, and so that's kind of where we're at now. From here, we're working through a program of spaces. That's an internal team member. We've had one meeting, Mike King with Huckabee. We've talked and developed an initial program. From there, we move into some internal meetings, getting my consultants on board, getting my team members on board, and then we start setting up any necessary schematic design meetings that we would need to get that input from staff, community members. It's really kind of up to you guys how, like Mr. G said, frequency, who's involved in that, and I would recommend at least having one during schematic design. We can make some progress, come back, share the updates, and then maybe have another one in DD if necessary, to show the progress that we made and continue to get feedback. I will say the schedule, as you can see here, is very, it is compressed. The goal was to get the project complete for the start of the next school year, so we would really have to be hitting these marks to be able to get that turned over. But I can definitely put something together more detailed than kind of these milestones of what that might look like for both staff and community involvement meetings.
In terms of the calendar, I see though, it looks to me that if we're gonna have, you have to have a cutoff in order for you guys to complete what you're talking about. So if you're talking about design, development, construction documents, minimum of 30 days to do that? I mean, a minimum that it would take to draw those documents in appropriate form or less?
Yeah, it would take longer than that. I mean, in schematic design, we're taking the information that we know. We're currently building the model. We use Revit to document the building, and so we're currently building that. From there, we would go out and verify and make sure the plans that we have are actually what's in the field. So we've got that nailed down, and that's verified. And so schematic design is really trying to get our hands around the project, see what information we know right now that can be put into the documents, gathering information, and then design development gets into more of the details. It just kind of builds upon itself. So I would say as we progress, it gets more intense, and it's more involved the further we go. as approaching that sign and seal date of March 31st.
And so again, if March 31st is our target, what I'm asking is that basically public input has to stop at some point in time so that you guys can do, so we're talking
I
about
see.
mid-February,
Um,
1st of February?
I would say 1st of February.
Okay, so that means that we need to plan to try, in terms of where you are, to have maybe a meeting somewhere early in January and somewhere end of January?
That would work. Early January would be good, to get that input so we could react during schematic design, and then share the updates that we've made by the time we get to January 20th, the end of schematic design, and then follow up in DD. So in that early, end of January, beginning of February, and then we're set for wrapping up the documents by March 31st.
And then from our parents and involvement, they're not gonna be available probably until after January 4.
Mhm.
We have to get notice to them about when we're doing this, so again, we probably need to know something by the 1st of December of what dates you're looking at, so we can put something out there before our students leave on the 23rd or the 19th, whatever date it is, and get it on the website to say we're having 2 meetings, so it's planned in advance, as much participation we can get, because, there are not gonna be many opportunities if we're gonna do this and try to have it complete.
Sure.
Okay, my other question is, what is DD?
Design development.
Very good. We all have our,
I
Something
get in the
else.
habit of using
Full
the,
of them,
the
so
short
I wanna
term.
make sure.
Never know.
Short terms, yeah.
I got a headline here.
Any other questions? Debbie's got her eyes up, thinking.
I'm still just blown away that construction start and done is 2 months. I mean, that's,
So, like I said, that is very aggressive. That is what we intend to communicate to the contractors. I have a feeling that some of them are going to say they can't meet that, and if that's the case, then the communication to them is the focus is any scope that we're doing in the 2-story building, because that has to be done for the start of the school year. So pre-K and K can move in, which right now is just a secure vestibule. So that's easily attainable for the start of that school year. And so they would get that done and move into that 1-story building and the scope there. And by chance, maybe there is a chance they could have it all done. So that, obviously, that would be the goal. Worst case scenario would be end of the year and then do the full switch over then.
So
So you're-
I'm sorry,
oh.
you first.
So you're thinking though that you would have enough done in 2 months for those pre-K and kinder to be able to start somewhere in a classroom?
So they would be in that 2-story building.
Right.
So right now, the only scope that we have planned for that part of the building
Yeah,
is that
like
secure vestibule at the main entrance. Everything else is staying as is for right now. So that'll be done. They can move into that 1st and 2nd story pre-KK, while the contractor moves into the 1-story building where there is more scope. We're demoing some walls, creating openings.
I guess, but the reality is, unless we move the deadline for when we complete, so they're working.
Oh, I know.
There's
Well-
no, I mean, you can't, the farther we push it to the 1st of the year,
I get it.
the more time they have to build.
I'm redoing
Yeah.
just my kitchen right this second, and I'm 5
Don't
weeks
ask
in
me about
on it,
redoing.
just a kitchen. So I'm
So-
like, oh my gosh.
My question for you is this, you've used the words very aggressive. What is the likelihood that we don't meet that deadline?
The August deadline? I would say for the entire scope or the 2-story building? Everything?
Not like,
I would say not likely, but the good thing about this project is there's not a lot of scope, and so we're gonna get maybe different contractors who aren't bidding a new high school or a new elementary school. So there's that group of contractors that would be interested in this scope, and maybe this is their sole focus or primary focus. So I would say there's a chance, but I would say it's probably slim. But I think we can communicate what the goal is to them, that ideally this project is done in August. And by being selective about what materials we're choosing, we're giving you the best opportunity to meet that deadline. But we're in our back pocket and plan B, knowing that if it extends to December, then we would switch the rest of the school over at that point. Sure.
Any idea on where you're gonna do put your trucks, put your materials and stuff like that?
So that'll be, the contractor will decide that with, working with the district for input, and they'll come to you with a plan of where everything would be laid out, their job trailer, the materials would be stored. That's more on the contractor, not necessarily for the architect. I'll also say the new drive, so I've started communication with my consultants. They've got some ideas, so they're starting to think through how that new drive could be placed to help with traffic flow around the neighborhood and on this site. When I was speaking to them, giving them all the information that I have to this point, they started formulating some ideas, so they're thinking through that already, and we'll come to the district with options to consider of how that drop-off pickup, drives, traffic flow around the site could function well.
Would you need to also, consult with the city?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, and I'll start having conversations with the city as well on my end for the building, just to get them up to speed on the project, make them aware of it so that whenever they see the drawings, when we submit for permit, they're generally familiar with the scope of the project and what we're doing.
Well, we really need to find out from y'all, is this the scope that y'all want to address? Is this where you want to stay with this and move forward from here?
I think this matches what we talked about before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see a reason to slow it down. I'd rather us be aggressive and try, rather than say, well, reality is say we don't do it this fast. I mean, I understand the reality, but we gotta
We have the
give a target.
contingency, we've already started looking out, mapping out plans where we leave the first grade where they are, and we don't have to move them twice, so they're already on the campus that they would be on as relative when they roll up to second graders, and all we move for this time being would be fifth and sixth graders, and then move the pre-K and the kinder, and that's all we would move, moving into this next year. So we've already been working on those plans.
Any other questions, concerns, or comments?
So what I'll do is, I have a more detailed schedule that I'll take a look at of where those additional meetings would fall best, and start that communication with Mr. G and Eileen about how those meetings can fall into my more detailed schedule. This was just kind of hitting the highlights of when major milestones would happen for the project.
I mean, I think 2 is kind of a minimum for us, so if that's what we can get, let's get it.
Okay.
That's good.
Anything else?
Right.
Okay.
Then we'll move on to item 7A, a presentation by Owners Building Resource on construction delivery methods.
Thank you.
So I asked Robert to come speak to y'all, because in order for them to do what they've gotta do, the next part is you have to decide on a construction method, and Robert's gonna take you through that process.
This is all about staying on track. It's all about staying on track. And if you notice those dates up there, you'll recognize March and April weren't anywhere close to your normal board meeting dates. So in order to stay on this path, if Huckabee certainly got the horses and the consultants that can produce the drawings with good cooperation from the city, and your staff's committed to this. But it's likely we may have to ask you guys to come in for a special meeting to get some, some
We'll
plan
have the
for you.
meetings we need to
So-
have to get this on track, and stay on track.
Well, part of this process is deciding on delivery methods, and it's an odd term, but that's what the state calls it. Basically, delivery methods, as defined by the statute, set the tone for how you procure and what that relationship is with your general contractor. Back in the old days, we all know the terms where we're putting it out to bid, we're sending it out to bid, we're gonna take bids on this, and that's the way it was done forever. Well, at least until 1995, and that's when the legislature got creative and started adopting some private practice techniques for engaging contractors to be responsive to market conditions, scope of work, budgets, all of those criteria. The old way of doing business sometimes was difficult. You put out a package like this and you get some good qualifiers, but then Billy Bob's contracting and oil change just happens to come in low, and it's the first $2 million job he's done, but he's got bonding capacity. You're real hesitant, but you were limited on your ability to jump over that low bidder to go to the next contractor. And so the statute created new ways of engaging your contractors. It started in 1995, and it really was based on the premise of deciding which delivery method brought the best value to your project, and it added some flexibility in how you select your contractors. Over the years, we learned from our experiences and through a couple legislative sessions, we changed that, and created some criteria by which, a school district could select their contractor, and it mirrored that in the private sector. Basically, any criteria that a business would use in assessing a contractor's viability for a project is reputation, experience, skill set, staffing, personnel that he's proposed on the project, if they've worked with your neighbors and done good jobs or bad jobs, and whether they've worked with you in the past or not. Also, it incorporated historically underutilized business criteria. There's various things you can use in, excuse me, in selecting your general contractor. And in that process, they actually came up with 7 delivery methods. I'm only going to talk about 6 because there's one out there called bridging, and since 1995, we've never seen an occasion to use it. It's a mess, and it's very complicated, and it doesn't make any sense for school projects. But the ones I'm going to talk about tonight are competitive bidding, which was the traditional way of doing business with your contractor, competitive seal proposals, CM agent, design build, CM at risk, and job order contracting. And I'll talk through these quickly, and then based on your discussion earlier, I'll tell you which one we're recommending. The traditional path was competitive building. That's one we're all familiar with. You get a stipulated lump sum from your contractor, and selection was almost exclusively based on pricing. Now, there were some pros to that. You do have your single source of accountability with a contractor who's bonded and insured that's doing the work. You get competitive pricing typically across all market fronts, but the contractor's not involved during design, which is the case on most of these delivery methods. But you have the strong possibility of having a confrontational relationship with that general contractor. We truly have not used competitive bidding on very many projects over the last, 25 years. But competitive bidding's not bad if you've got a clearly defined scope that is very unlikely to change. And it's a new, green space project or a very simply defined renovation project. A hybrid to competitive bidding is what we call competitive seal proposals, or CSPs. And you might have heard this, you guys have gone to some of your Tasby training. Very, very similar. The only difference is, in addition to the stipulated lump sum that you look at for value and pricing, now you get to bring some of those evaluation criteria into your assessment of that contract. Like I said, reputation, experience, so on and so forth. And it's not, you don't have to make that decision just on price. You also have the ability to negotiate with the contractor that does appear to present the best value to you to see if he might be able to be more in line or come more in line with the lower price general contractor. The relationships are very similar between the various parties. A lot of flexibility in the selection, which is good. Again, you're looking at projects that have a pretty well-defined scope. You do get your single source of accountability for bonding, insurance, and protecting the district. But you don't have them involved during the design. Sometimes can lead to a little longer duration of the project, but it's best suited for new projects and simple facility renovations that aren't particularly schedule sensitive. But the fact that you've got the flexibility and selection for a contractor, as Josh was saying, that it might be geared specifically for this type of work, is a big component in selecting contractors through competitive seal proposals. CM agent is a process that some districts, for whatever reason, have used over the years. There is basically no general contractor. The owner is the contractor, if you will. You hold all of the subcontracts, and you can choose which subcontractors you want to have bonding and insurance on. You got a lot of exposure with it. For all the pros, I can probably give you twice as many cons on why you would tend to steer away from this, because you, as the owner, are in control of all those subcontractors. And I know Mr. G says he's got a hard job and he's working all the time and he's got no extra time, but truly, he would have no extra time to steer a project through CM agency. And so we very, very seldom incorporate this into our recommendations for actual construction delivery. Then there's design build, which is not a bad process. Some districts have used it quite successfully. It's interesting in that there's a trust factor to this. Your contractor is your architect, your contractor is your architect. It's a team. And so you put all of your eggs in one basket with a contractor, architect team that, prepares the design and gives you pricing and builds the project for you. There are some advantages to it. You can address some schedule challenges. You still have your single source of accountability. But if it's a green space, brand new building, that's schedule sensitive, and your scope is clearly defined such that you as the owner understand it, you know, going into this project, I can see some eyes up there, well, exactly which walls are we moving, what are we trying to do here? We're still in that evolution process. Design build is not really suited for that because you lose control of a lot of the decision steps through the design build process. Then there's job order contracting, a great delivery method for small projects. A lot of districts incorporate this. In fact, over the last recent years, these job order contractors have been incorporated into many of the purchasing co-ops and buy board. So if you've got a time-sensitive project, you gotta tear down a wall, put in a door, replace some air conditioning, do some roof repairs, do a little piece of paving. Jock is an easy way to get that done. It's not really intended for larger projects, but it is there as a method to allow you to address some maintenance, modest capital improvements in a short period of time. And it's usually a good value if it's approached properly, but you have to understand it because you as a school district through a jock have to understand, because they're going to come to you with the scope of work and a budget, and you have to be able to assess whether or not there's value in that. This project's a little bit too big for job order contracting, but it's a great tool to use.
This may be something we have to incorporate at junior high school to get
For some of the other smaller projects, yeah, that's correct. And then finally, you've got construction manager at risk. A lot of districts use this. It's from our perspective, this is really a market-driven and project-driven selection process versus any of the others. You select the contractor based on his qualifications and his fees that he presents to you. The key components of CM at risk is, one, they're involved throughout the design process, looking at phasing, looking at staging, constructability, estimating, through the design process, hand in hand with your project manager, your architect, all those folks acting as a team to ultimately bring you the best value. When they're done, they present a guaranteed maximum price to you. Now, I would say, having been involved, you know, since the early days, the risk factor, there's really no risk anymore because truly they don't come back with a guaranteed maximum price until Josh and his guys come back with 100% drawings. This came out of the private sector when you were trying to phase a project. Developer needs to get something going, so he awards an earthwork project just to get the thing, get the underground, get the foundation, get that going. Then he issues a foundation package, and then a structural package, and so on and so forth. School attorneys don't like you to do that, and they won't let you do that. So it's evolved to 100% drawings, but the value of having that contractor involved during the design and the value of being able to see his open books, see all of his sub bids, and pick and choose some of those subcontractors can lend itself to very successful projects. And if you have a large new project to try to tackle, CM at risk would be the way to go. So having been through all of those, looking at the schedule, looking at the scope of work, our recommendation tonight would be that you consider competitive seal proposals. I think, as Josh indicated, there is a market out there, general contractors that are hungry for $1 million, $1.5 million, $2, $3, $4 million project. They're not looking for a $120 million high school project or whatever that may be. They are geared towards projects of this nature, and they're subcontractors. They're demo guys, they're drywall guys. You know, those guys aren't equipped to go out and do drywall on 450,000 square feet. But you give them 20,000 feet of renovation work, they're in, they're out, and they're geared towards that. And so I think from our perspective, the competitive seal proposal will bring you guys the best value. You get the selection flexibility, you give them the opportunity to look at your schedule expectations. Huckabee and their team will define the scope, and ultimately I think bring you guys back the best value for this. I think given the market conditions, you're going to get the best competitive pricing for that.
Flipping it in terms of which of the options would be best to try to beat or meet the time frame? Is there a difference compared to cost? And you're talking about price saving and
Well, the CM procurement process is gonna cost you 60 days. You know, 30 to 45 days anyway. You would lose that time. And by the time we get them on board, a large benefit of having them involved in the design process will be lost, because these guys are gonna be screaming through, you know, into construction documents. CSPs, I think, is the best opportunity for you to meet the timeline.
What size is this project considered? The size, what size is this project considered? Is it small, medium, or?
I would consider it a relatively small project. No less complex, but, you know, one of the things that I think Josh touched on is we don't have to worry about foundation, we don't have to worry about structural steel, we don't even have to worry about HVAC. Now, Eileen wants to worry about some roofing, and we'll look at that maybe in another phase, but this is some demos, some walls, some windows, some doors, and creating a engaging learning environment. So it's a lot of the stuff that I think we can get our hands on pretty quickly. The only, the one thing that I think is gonna have the longest lead item is potentially your playscapes. Right now, those are running 14 to 16 weeks, so, that's something that we don't have to have included as part of the CSP. That's actually something we can procure in advance so that it's ready when these guys have the drive-in, have it graded, and we can go and put that in. So that's some of the flexibility we'll look at as we go through the process.
That's that question. We're at overview time, we're not, you know, number question, we're not down to the weeds yet.
You're not spending any money yet, but the statute says before you can advertise for bidding, the board has to determine the delivery method that they believe is the best value. That allows us to prepare the front end and put this thing out on the streets as competitive seal proposals. It's a mechanical step that the statute requires.
And we'll be voting on that in regular business.
When is this 30 to 60 day time period happening, where we're waiting for proposals and?
Well, this won't happen if you recall, we were looking by the end of March, we would put the competitive seal proposal price or solicitation out on the street.
Okay. And then hopefully have that all sorted by the end of May.
No, have them sorted hopefully in time for you to approve it in well, I guess was CDs in April, I'm sorry. Through March and April, and then by sometime in April, you guys will be approving a stipulated lump sum from a contractor. Just like we did with the other engagements, we will come back to you with not just a bid tab, but a ranking based on specific evaluation criteria.
So it falls within our time.
No, absolutely, no, that's,
All right.
exactly,
All right,
this was all part of the
I'm just
collaborative
looking, it
strategy
says
here.
longer overall duration on your slide here, and you got me a little worried talking
No, no, no,
only
no.
2 months, so I just
No.
wanted to make sure I was,
We're good.
okay.
All right,
question.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We now move to item 7C, Kettle ISD Gifted and Talented Program Overview.
Good evening. In your board book, you have an overview of the Gifted and Talented program, and I hope that you were able to look at that report and found it helpful. In the next few minutes, I was going to review how our program aligns with the how our program aligns with the Texas State Plan for Gifted and Talented, which you may have explored. It was linked in the report. I'm not sure if you did or not, but I'll give you the quick overview. The Texas State Plan was recently updated in 2019 to reflect the most current research in gifted and talented learning. It provides us, the district, with the accountability standards that we use to evaluate our program and design it. The state plan guides all of our work. It categorizes our programming into 6 categories called aspects. And within these aspects are 80-plus indicators. It delineates what actions we are required to do for accountability, and also to stretch us beyond in some areas to exemplary. The first aspect is fidelity of service. This aspect ensures that we're in compliance and that we're continually monitoring our program. As referenced in the report, in the last section, we did do a comprehensive program review in the spring to verify compliance for the 2021 school year, and we have the required procedures and handbooks in place. On the district website, the ratings are broken down and available by each of the standards, the indicators for the community. The second aspect is student assessment. This one is very lengthy and very important. It covers most of the indicators. This one is about the use of student data and the necessity for policies, including those for transfer, furlough, exits, how we communicate to parents, how do we progress monitor students to make sure that we are meeting their needs in the best way that we can. In the service design aspect, the state says we must have a system of service options with consistent implementation. Are we meeting the students' needs through challenging options, and what can we offer above and beyond what we're required? Is the student work both collaborative, independent? And curriculum instruction addresses the requirement for students to participate in projects or performances that are targeted to outside audiences. It focuses on providing activities with depth and complexity. So you read about the service design and the curriculum instruction aspects in the program design portion of the report, and there were links there for the TPSP site for the projects development, and also our recent expansion of advanced course offerings. And the KISD staff has initial and annual training requirements and various opportunities to complete them. This includes not only teachers, but leaders and counselors. These are in compliance, and in some cases beyond the compliance in professional learning aspect 5, and are described in the report. And finally, the family and community engagement section of the report, we list 4 ways that KISD applies the indicators in aspect 6. This is all about parents getting understanding of the GT program and being involved in the services and the design, and it's critical to the success of our program. So for the last few months, our team has reviewed the Texas State Plan, the spring recommendations from our GTAC committee, the program evaluation, and our current data and processes, and we set forth these 4 overarching priorities for the year. They're focused on equity, professional development, collaboration, and streamlining of processes. So we're committed to the continuous improvement process in the GT program to make it even better for our students, and we're excited for this year in GT, our first year back in person in a while. In addition to all the resources on our Kennedale website, if you're interested in more information about the state plan or any documents related to GT programming and requirements, you can visit the TEA page. And thank you. Do you have any questions about the slides or the report?
Mr. Unright.
No questions.
Yes. So you talked about the professional development, and I get that with once the teachers, they have to take the 30 hours
Yes.
in order to provide services. But for them to go through the screening process or to recognize if a student shows the characteristics of a student with GT-ness, what does that look like?
That is part of their initial training. That is an area of focus for us as we look at our equity policy, especially for those twice exceptional and English learner students, just to get a more robust training for teachers ongoing, as well as rubrics for that, recognizing them and making sure that we're not losing any students that could be possibly going through the evaluation process and being identified. Does that answer your question? Okay.
What age do they start, do you start evaluating kids for the program?
There's a universal screening of all second graders, but students can be referred at any time, beginning in kindergarten.
So, just for my clarification, is there like a target percentage of teachers, or is it 100% that we are trying to have qualified to do GT assessment, or is it?
Yeah, we have all students that serve the GT student. So if you look in the program design portion of the report, in K to 6, those students are clustered. So they can be in any classroom. So all those teachers would need to have their GT hours and be prepared. Then as they go up into the classes, if they're in advanced classes like honors or AP classes, and they're going to have GT students in there, they will have to be, they'll have to be prepared with their hours as well. We just got all our CTE teachers certified, correct? That was something that was new, so that those students can be served with teachers that were prepared as well in the CTE, and I think that was last year.
So looking through the report, it says in spring of 2020, you switched to just identifying through map results. Is that the only way that kids are being identified right now?
In spring of 2020, so MAP is used as our screener across second grade, but students can be referred by anyone, and a host of data is looked at for the student. But the MAP initially will identify students at a certain percentage that will be looked at to go on for additional evaluation.
So since starting at kindergarten, they take MAP as well. So you keep saying second grade, but is it?
Well, second grade is where we actually screen all of them to see if they will proceed. COGAT.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
what
I apologize.
I was like,
Yes.
what? Okay. And then you
I'm not
mentioned
sure.
the GTAC committee. I forget the word you used, but whatever was observations or recommendations from the spring. Is there a GTAC committee currently?
There will be this year as well, and they will work in the spring on the program evaluation.
Okay.
And that includes community, parents, teachers, staff.
Additional questions, comments? And just refresh, Dr. V, I don't know, was it last year, the year before, that you changed the process to attempt to screen more children, identify more children? Is that still the ongoing process? Not just screening them all, but really trying to identify and capture as many as we could.
Yes, to build upon what Ms. Bolding said, part of the 2019 state plan really encouraged districts, required in many cases, to try to identify students who were otherwise might, slip through the cracks. And so if you look at the report, it's broken down by demographic. It's similar to what we were presented with last month whenever Delaney did their report as well. And so what you can see is a steady increase in the number of African American students who have been identified, and the number of Hispanic students who have been identified, as well as the number of economically disadvantaged. Previously, so as Ms. Bolding said, they used MAP scores as well, but they also use common assessments. Because common assessments at this time are not necessarily common across all grade levels and teachers, we thought that it would be a better option this year to solely focus on MAP to ensure that we are being fair and equitable to all of our students. But as she said, that's not the only way that they can be identified. Parents can refer, teachers can refer. In addition to the COGAT screener that's given in second grade. And so what the MAP really does in many ways is we're looking at the top 5% of each demographic. So even if they don't meet necessarily the threshold, we're still going to screen them for GT because maybe they don't test well on the computer, but they do have areas of giftedness that we can serve in that way.
That's what I was getting at with, is it just MAP?
We use MAP across the board because it's consistent.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense,
Mhm.
because then everyone's getting the same,
Right.
good.
I look at our specials on one end of the spectrum and our GT on the other, and state beats us up because we don't take care of specials, but doesn't really care so much if we don't push our GT. So, you know, are we as a district focused on that, again, that equity piece is we put a lot of resources here, are we continuing to find ways to add resources or need to add resources to facilitate our GT students so they are, you know, able to accelerate and receive enhancement and do those, are we focused on doing those things?
Yes, absolutely. So we are above and beyond the state requirements for every aspect of GT. If you look at the program review that's linked on the Kennedy IC website, you can see all the different areas in which we are already exemplary. And of course, we're going to continue striving to do that. We did have some challenges the past year with our GT students. So the goal of the GT program is to serve students in the area of giftedness so that they can reach their full potential, which is above grade level. That's part of the piece. We did have some of our GT students who did not earn a passing score on the STAR test last year for a variety of reasons, including trauma and lack of access to in-person instruction. So as a result of that, those students this year have been furloughed so that they can receive instruction that's going to help them meet the grade level standard this year. But because we didn't want to completely negate the services or, you know, do away with them completely, we are, if you can see it in the report as well, we are offering an after-school option for the students who are furloughed. So time is finite, and during the school day, we already have built-in intervention and accelerated learning opportunities. We want to make sure that those kids can access that primarily. But they can stay after school as well and take advantage of these opportunities to engage in projects and creativity and critical thinking that they might not otherwise receive. And then there's the lunch bunch for our younger students who have the opportunity to eat with a GT teacher. All of that is above and beyond the state requirements. The state says we have to cluster the students with a GT certified teacher. That's what you have to do. And so lunch bunch, after school services, pull out, all of that is us going above and beyond.
Cluster in classrooms?
So whenever you do scheduling, you're looking at we're looking at an opportunity for gifted students to learn alongside their peers so that they're not the only person in the classroom necessarily who's in the GT program. That's often done in some school districts with English learners as well, so that they have a group of students who share some common interests, some commonalities. And so that's something that we do here.
Co-teach classes too.
Sometimes, yes. It depends on the district, it depends on the scheduling processes, but sometimes GT students feel different or feel like they don't connect to their peers in ways that others do, and so clustering gives them an opportunity to develop connections with students who may have similar strengths, similar areas of giftedness that they might not otherwise have.
Is there a state requirement on the number that kids should be within a classroom?
The number in the cluster?
Yeah.
No, because schools are so different. There's so many different sizes of schools. So in a large district, let's say I was looking at some of the state reports, there are some campuses in the area, not here, who have 20 or 30% of the entire student body who are identified as gifted and talented. That's not necessarily indicative of very clear guidelines with assessment. And so with something like that, you don't want to have an entire class necessarily of students who are in the gifted program because diversity matters. So it just depends on how many students are in the program per grade level. You'll see we're sitting at about 10% across the board, which is on level with the state and also in line with what many experts suggest is accurate in terms of giftedness. If everybody is in the gifted and talented program, then it's not a gifted and talented program. It's tier 1 instruction.
But a child who is gifted in math and may struggle with all the other subjects is still provided support.
Absolutely, because our goal is to help these students reach their potential in their areas of giftedness. We want them to excel and explore the opportunities they have.
Any other questions? You okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone? Move to item 7D, the 2021 tax roll summary.
Mr. Adams?
Wake up. Tell us how bad it is.
We spent all summer appraising values back to January 1st. And eventually we come down to setting a tax rate, and that summary that we have posted there is our combined tax rate and how much taxes we should bring in. Strictly information only. You've already done the hard work to set the tax rate. And Mr. Law has done the other part of it and coming up with values.
Any questions? Thank you much.
Thank you.
Move to item 7E, first reading of Tasby Policy Update 118.
Okay, so with all the legislation that came out from this latest session and then the subsequent special sessions in the summer, there's been a lot of changes with the education law. So these are all legal policies for the most part. There are a few local policies that will come out of those legal requirements handed down from the legislature. There's quite a few of them, so this is all for your reading enjoyment for the first reading, and then we'll get in more depth on the second reading.
Any just overall questions about this update that you want to try to get answered now to help you further understand it? Well, enjoy your 1,000+ pages.
So I give you the synopsis pages to help you with that.
I think we got them in the packet.
By the way, it's only 974 pages, not 1,000.
Gotta love our legislation.
Yeah, just another 974. Yeah. All right, then we'll move on to item 8. This is items requiring action. The first item is 8A, discuss and consider approval of Kettle Education Foundation grant awards for 2021.
Would you like to come down also?
Come on, get on
All right, so Ms. Williams, or Dr. Williams?
So this is the front part, so thank you for us to be here. The executive board, Ms. Wheeler and Ms. Burr are with me tonight, and we are so excited to present you with the award 2021. So President Clark, Superintendent G, and the member of the board, I'm so excited. You should have in your agenda the list of the grant. We have 13 grants, 8 of them being at the high school, 1 at the junior high, and 4 at Arthur. This year, neither Delaney nor Peterson sent us any grant to review. So since 2006, we have awarded around $400,000 was given to KISD in the form of grant. Would you consider to approve the grant award for this year, which a grant total is $19,245.30?
Right?
And he's so excited.
Award grants, you approve it tonight, we hope to award the grants tomorrow.
So yes, thank you. So if you agree tonight to award those grants and approve those grants, then tomorrow morning we will go to the high school, the junior high, and Arthur to deliver the big checks for each of those teachers. And an interesting fact, you have several science grants. You have an archery, you have theater, you have ELAR, choir, yearbook, speech path, and PE teacher were asking for grants. So it's a nice representation of your teachers.
Any questions? All right, then I'll entertain a motion with regard to the Kettle Education Foundation grants.
Chair, I make a motion to accept the donation of the funds from the Kennedale Education Foundation as presented.
Motion by Mr. Owens.
Second.
Second by Mr. Mr. Glover. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Chair hears none. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
on to item 8B, discuss and consider the approval of remodel procurement method.
So you heard the presentation from Robert and Josh about scope and then what we are looking for as far as the way to procure it. So it's kind of what y'all want to do now as far as moving forward with that.
Do we need further discussion based on the presentation we had? I do not see such a request. Then I'll entertain a motion with regard to the competency of proposals as being the best delivery method for renovations to James A. Arthur Intermediate School.
I'll make a motion to recommend competitive bill proposals as the best value delivery method for renovations to Arthur Intermediate.
Motion by Ms. Villagomez.
Second.
Is that you, Sean? Second by Mr. Glover. He's beaten. Any further discussion or questions or comments? And all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The chair hears none. That motion passes unanimously. We move on to item 8C, discuss, consider approval of the 2021-2022 district and campus plan improvements. Remember your books?
Oh, yes.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Last month, we presented you with the district and campus improvement plans. We have used a checklist from an online software, Plan for Learning, to ensure that we are in compliance with all of the statutes and federal requirements as well. And so here we're asking for your approval of these plans.
Any questions or comments of Dr. Boo before we proceed to a vote? Then I will entertain a motion with regard to approval of the 2021-2022 district and campus improvement plans.
Chairman, I make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 district improvement plan and campus improvement plans as presented.
Motion by Mr. Bisco.
Second.
Second by Mr. Glover. Any further discussions or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair hears none. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Move on to discuss and consider approval of the purchase of Tutor.com. 8D.
This was presented at the last board meeting. Dr. Boo went through all of that with you. We feel like we benefit our students and it's coming out of the ESSER fund.
So I've presented you here with 3 pricing options. What is required per policy is that any purchase over $50,000 must be approved by the board. So I've provided 3 options. The first 2 do not require board approval. However, in discussing the different opportunities with the principals, our secondary principals have requested that we have the unlimited option for secondary. Our teachers are working hard. They're staying before school, or coming before school. They're staying after school, but our students need more support. This 24/7 option over breaks, over the summer, we feel would be very beneficial for our students and helping them regain some of the lost time from last year. Any questions?
Pricing structure of that?
One thing I do want to point out is Ms. Wells, she listened to the board meeting from last month, and she typed up all of the questions that were asked as well as the answers. I noticed that the representative, a couple of you asked questions that she touched on but didn't address directly, and so we wanted to make sure that you had the information as well.
Thank you, Ms. Bell.
Any questions?
Took her a long time.
Right. Then I'll entertain a motion with regard to the purchase of Tutor.com licenses as presented.
Do we need to know, which option or?
Yeah.
That was my, that'd be my.
So-
Are we going with the
We don't
option
have to approve
3?
1 or 2. We only
So
have to approve the unlimited.
we're requesting approval for option 3
Option
Okay.
three,
Mhm.
so we
Yeah.
need to put that in.
per the request of the secondary principals.
If
And
you
this
wanna
is
put
from the
that in
ESSER
motion, that's fine,
funds,
make it
so,
clear.
okay. I make a motion to purchase Tutor.com licenses as presented.
Motion by Mr. Glover.
For option 3.
For option
Option
3.
3.
For option 3.
For option, yeah. Second.
Second by Ms. Moody. Any further questions, comments, or concerns? And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair hears none. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
One thing that I want to add to the last piece is that after the last meeting, we have added information to our website for military families about how they can access this for free already.
Great. Item 8E is up for consideration, discuss and consider approval of the purchase of Fontas and Pinnell.
This is another purchase over $50,000. So I've provided you on the first page with the design for responsive literacy. It's a framework that we use in our literacy classes. It's based upon the gradual release of responsibility. So when a human, including young students, are learning something new, the teacher models the skill or strategy, the students practice the skill or strategy in a group, and then they work independently. And so it's gradually releasing them until they're able to work towards independence, which is the goal of all of the learning that happens in Kinderdale. So each of the pieces represents a piece of the Fountains and Pinnell classroom, which was what we adopted in 2019. So there are various products that do this, but we seek alignment here. And so we've purchased a variety of pieces. However, when we met, let's see, it's the last fall. So I know we've had an election since then, and some of you weren't here for that conversation. We talked about the ramifications of school closure and just the different challenges that we faced last year. We didn't have a choice but to address, and the actions the district was going to take to help accelerate student learning. So one of the things that I talked about is Lli Kits, which we do not have. They're very, very expensive. There is a color kit that's associated with each grade level. So what's really neat about these kits is that it's books written on grade level. So for example, let's say we have a 5th grade student who's reading at a 3rd grade reading level. If you bring in books that are appropriate for 3rd graders, a lot of 5th grade students won't like them. They won't be interested in the topic. The Lli Kits, they have books written at the level for the student that needs the acceleration, but the topics are more consistent with things that are going to engage that particular grade level. I've used these particular systems in another district with great success. The kids love the books. Kids who say they hate reading, I say, nobody hates reading, you just haven't found the right book. They'll sit in summer school, so these are students who have not passed a course, they'll sit in summer school and they'll read these books. And so what we've done so far, I've provided you with some information. So I showed you what we purchased in 2019 over the summer, and you can see how it aligns with this graph here. This fall, we purchased some additional pieces from this particular vendor, including the Lli Kits for kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade. What I am proposing or requesting is kits for our older students. Our older students have needs as well. So I would like to purchase the red and gold kits, which is going to serve our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students, as well as additional guided reading. So when we did the adoption in 2019, money is finite as well, and we didn't have the funds to purchase guided reading for 5th and 6th grade. In a typical year, 5th and 6th grade students, they like to read their own books, so they do book clubs, they do independent reading, they sometimes do whole class novels. This isn't a typical year. So I went into Arthur during one of the staff development days, and I met with the teachers. I gave them some different options. I said, what do you need? You're working with these students. What is it that you think would make the biggest difference? We did a training over Fountains of Pinnell, and I received information after I brought them some samples, and they requested guided reading. In addition to that, we have our Letterland phonics materials that go up to 3rd grade, but our older kids also need some support in foundational language skills. So starting in 4th grade, it moves in the standards, it moves away from phonics and more into word study. And so I would also like to purchase the materials to incorporate word study, which is part of the responsive literacy framework in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And then I would also like to get additional materials for Arthur in the form of book clubs, so that it's the I do, we do, you do. So guided reading is the we do, and book clubs is the you do. And that's something they don't have currently, and so we want to make sure that they have materials to support our students and their unique needs this year. I also included the proposal for next year. This won't require your approval, but I just want you to see what we're working towards. So we wanted to make sure that what we purchased this year will be used this year, and then going into the summer, we'll make an additional purchase. We can provide additional training in the summer and move into next year. We're looking to use ESSER funds, which are unique to this year and not something we've had access to before. So this wouldn't take away from anything that we've already planned to buy. And when I presented you with the ESSER plan a couple months ago, this was included in it. I just hadn't had the quotes at that time. What questions do you have?
Can you expound on book clubs?
Sure. So book clubs might look like 4 different titles, and students are working in groups of 3 to 5. So they can be structured several different ways. What's really neat about the Fountains Pinellas Classroom book clubs is they come with a teacher card that have guiding questions that they can ask. They have thematic elements, so it gives the teacher more support. There are different ways to set them up, but what I like to do when I've led book clubs before is read this section of the book, come with a question that's going to generate discussion. And so the students are coming up with questions, and then they sit, 20, 30 minutes in a class period, and they talk about the book, a book club. It's based on what adults do. Adults don't read a whole class novel and then take a quiz. Adults read a book and then come and talk about it. And so it gives them some choice. They get to choose the title and often who they're working with. It also gives them an opportunity to read independently. But the materials that come with it give an opportunity for the teacher to hold the students accountable because they have some very specific information that they can share with the students. And if the students are struggling, it also has some prompting guides, additional things that they can throw out.
So
as well.
this would be getting, sorry, I understood that part, but would this be getting the books for the book club
Yes.
in the class? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're looking at the titles. The book club pieces are expensive, so in looking at what's available, we're going to purchase 2 sets of 5th grade because the 5th grade book clubs actually span 4th grade to 7th grade. Because next year, or coming soon, we're going to have 2 5th grade campuses. And so I'm thinking ahead in that sense because a 5th grade set of book clubs would be appropriate for 6th grade this year based on the map data that we reviewed, based on the conversations I've had with teachers. But then we're not purchasing something that we won't be able to use moving forward as well. Anything else?
So in terms of dollars, the request is gonna include $30,500.
So we've spent this year, this fiscal year, $30,510. What I would like to purchase, in addition to what we've already purchased, is the Lli Kits for the upper grade levels,
Right.
guided reading for Arthur, book clubs for Arthur, we do, you do, for Arthur, and then the word study for the older grade levels as well.
And that's the 45,000.
So it's an additional 45,000 to what we purchased, or what we've spent.
And then the 38 for next year.
And again, it's ESSER 3 money, so it was part of the original proposal.
It's not free money.
It's not free. We're working to use it very strategically based on needs and
But this
data.
takes our guided reading to the next level, so
Yeah.
we, as we're working on, getting students on level for reading, Autism and Fidelity are the trusted and tried people in guided reading projects, and this is where we're actually taking it to more grade level, so.
And that's our adoption. So we want to purchase something that's aligned with what we already have so that we're building upon the knowledge from year to year.
Right. On that note, because I know in the past I've seen a lot of different, and these are great, and I think they're great, and I especially love Letterland. So there's several that I think are so good, and I'm glad that we're doing this, but have we gone back to see all of these things that have been purchased that maybe aren't being used or aren't being,
We have.
yeah, so we're gonna nix some of those that,
Yes, ma'am.
Good.
Working on that.
Let's keep putting more on the teachers' plates.
well, that's what, I mean,
It-
because it's nice to update and pivot and see what is new and what's aligned with curriculum and all of that, but I just wanna make sure that,
Well, I
We
think that's a good
provided,
promise.
we provided the training. Last year training was difficult. It was done virtually because at that time we weren't able to do anything in person. And I don't know how many Zoom trainings you've attended, but I don't get as much out of Zoom trainings as I do as face-to-face. So during the staff development days this year, we brought in, it's a TT professor, was until very recently the editor of the Reading Teacher Journal. I mean, she's amazing. She came in and trained our early, so K2, and then she went to K2, 3, 4, we did 2 separate sessions, so it was very grade level specific, and then she came back and did Arthur the next week. So I think that kind of re-energized them. I was able to sit through these sessions, and the teachers were very engaged. That's where I got the idea, because I said, here's some options, and they requested guided reading and book clubs.
I just wanna make sure it's replacing something.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, we don't wanna lurch to the greatest, the latest and greatest thing, and all of a sudden, well, it doesn't work for us. What works for us, what works for our teachers, what we have to focus on.
Mr. G mentioned the instructional rounds that we've started, and I think that will help as well. Just developing a common language, a common framework for what grade instruction looks like as well, and these materials will support that.
Any additional questions? Then I'll entertain a motion with regard to the purchase of additional Fontes and Pinella resources for targeted instructional support as presented.
I make a motion to purchase the additional Fountas and Pinnell resources for targeted instruction to support instruction as presented.
Motion by Ms. Moody,
Second.
second by Ms. Villagomez. Any further comment or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair hears none. That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Move to item 8F, discuss and consider approval of Tarrant County Appraisal District Board of Directors. In this process, I'm going to suggest that we start with maybe a nomination process. Again, we can cast votes up to 25 for an individual candidate. We can cast and spread those votes out amongst candidates. So, I mean, probably the easiest thing to do is if anyone has anyone they'd like to nominate based upon the information we have, let's at least start with, if we narrow down the list to people who are nominated and supported by the board. So I'll open the floor for any nominations with regard to the board of directors. And most of us don't know these people, so that's the problem. In terms of background, I mean, Mike Lehman, came out of Mansfield in the kind of the safety field. I mean, he does know our district, just to throw that out if it makes any difference. Catherine Wellman's been a long-time serving member in Arlington and, has gone over the board. Obviously, we have, Mr. Osada, who's here with a representative. So again, I just open the floor to anyone who has any specific preferences first, and then we talk about whether or not we want to block the vote or spread the vote.
Well, since Mr. Losada does have a representative here, I think I'd like to recommend that,
He'd be a candidate for vote?
Yes.
Okay, so we have Mr. Osada. Any other nominations or persons that any board member would like to add to the nomination list?
Which one was from Mansfield?
Mike Lehman was from Mansfield. And again, it's nice to have somebody in your area sometimes, but that's not really all that critical on the board, on that board, but it does help to have some local connections. And there are some qualified candidates. We look at their credentials in terms of what they've done, and I think that's an important consideration. And if I, one more time, the chair hears no further nominations, then I'll entertain a motion with regard to the allocation of votes to Mr. Losada. You have to follow a specific ballot statement. I'm sorry, let's go back to that.
Trying to go back to find it.
Motion to cast, how many?
We have 25 votes.
We cast all of them for one candidate?
We only have one candidate.
So, yeah.
We only have one nominee, so that's probably how it falls.
All right, motion to cast 25 votes for Mr. Losada and sign resolution declaring these results.
A motion by Mr. Biscayne,
second.
a second by Mr. Owens. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair hears none. That motion passes, and we will submit the resolution as required. Thank you all for working on that. We now move to item 9, which is personnel items. Do we need to go into executive? We have nothing to take in closed session, so let's take care of items A and B in terms of just presenting those issues to the board.
Just for your information, we did, of course, hire Mr. Spruill, so I already brought that to your attention. And then we have our high school, our junior high band director,
action required on that, so then we'll move down to a safety and security report. The board members did request a conversation with regard to safety and security, and that is a matter which must be taken up in closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.076.
Do you wanna go ahead and do the s'mores and finish up with that, or?
Again, I don't know how much time, I mean, most of those are just reports. The live streaming board meeting conversation, we can probably take up, I mean, amongst this, but if anyone wants to stay for it, they can. I'm okay with taking those up if y'all are okay, so we get these people out of here so they don't have to stay for anything else. All right. Then we will defer on the closed session for safety and security and move to take care of items 11A, district s'more letters.
Okay, so you have the principals, s'mores. You don't have any questions for them on anything?
How's it going?
Here we go.
I know, again, no, I don't wanna do that, that would be my question, but we have to talk about how we have our meetings too, so we're not gonna do it that way, but that would be my question always. Nothing specific? All right, and move to B, COVID report.
All right, so, you had it was mapped out to you. Our numbers are tracking down, or staying down, which is a good thing, so we keep monitoring those. You also have the Tarrant County numbers, they have dropped to substantial, the orange level substantial. But you can see that their numbers are also trending down. We plan on staying in our status until at least through the holidays and see what happens post-holidays, see where we need to be, but right now we feel comfortable where we're at.
Then move on to attendance report and substitute, we do it together.
So actually,
Two reports here.
We got,
We have these.
this
Change-
is
these
separate.
updated.
I'll get into that one.
Two more this way.
So, what you have here is basically just our enrollment report. It's got attendance attached with it, but the one that I just handed you is our attendance is actually done by 6 weeks, even though we're on a 9-week schedule. Attendance has to be reported to the state in 6-week increments. And so this is a breakdown by the 6 weeks. Okay, so that's what this sheet is showing you. And basically, you can notice we went, at the high school, we went from 92 to 94 to 94.7, so it's trending up. At the high school, junior high went from 92.8 to 94.6 to 93.6, so it's kind of trending down. Arthur went from 92.2 to 95.6 to 95.9, so it's staying pretty consistent around that 95 range, which we talked about last time, where we'd like to see it. Delaney went from 91.6 to 94.1 to 93.7, so kind of trending down there. We are starting to see flu and some other sicknesses coming into play. In Patterson, 90.6 to 93.8 to 95.33, so we're trending up there. So we are continuing with our spraying. We spray our buildings, and we believe that is health and sickness, but like I said, attendance is one of those things that's slow to come around.
And then the sub-report.
And then on a substitute report, if you look at where the dividing line is on the left-hand side, that was where we were before we started making adjustments to our policies for substitutes. We were at about a under 50% fill rate up until that point in time. After we made the adjustments, our fill rates went up. They're kind of trending back down, but we're also starting to have basketball season and a lot of sports kicking in and taking teachers off campuses. So, I know we had quite a few out at the high school today. So, but for the most part, our fill rates have gotten much better this summer. So, all right.
We will defer on item E till we come back out after our executive session and kind of incorporate that in our board discussion. So we will now adjourn into closed session for discussion of safety and security pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.076. The time is 8:31.
And Mr. Sproul,
Everybody else?